Hello, everybody, and welcome into the 11th edition of SEC Live. I am your host, as always, Matthew Miller. Please give me a follow right there on X or Twitter or whatever you decide to call it, keeping it with sports over there. And then also, we have Matt Green here today from the Georgia channel. You can follow him right there on Twitter as well. Matt, how are you doing today?
Doing well, man. I'm glad to be here with you on SEC Live.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about it, and we might as well jump into it real quick. Let's talk about Bama versus SMU. I know where I stand on this. I want to get your opinion on Bama versus SMU and the playoff bracket and the decision that was made to keep Bama out and put SMU in.
So let's see here. Two things can be true. So I do, like, in my heart of hearts, right? And I think most people, I think Alabama would beat SMU if they're playing on a neutral field. I personally never really liked that argument in the college football playoff because there'd be years where it's the most deserving, and the years where it's actually we're just trying to get the best four, and it was just very open ended how the committee would do it. I'm cool with most deserving because I think for the most part we all understand it. So I do think Alabama is probably a better team than SMU right now, and I don't know what the point spread would be. I bet they'd probably be favored by 10 or so to beat SMU. But just the precedent that it would set for the committee, and you saw what Texas loses and is the highest at-large team. Penn State loses the second highest at-large team. SMU, it was literally the perfect storm for SMU. They lost on a last-second field goal. Like, if they would have been punished for playing that extra game, like Indiana and Tennessee, and they're all sitting at home, and Alabama, they're all sitting at home, and now all of a sudden, through 15 weeks, SMU is better than those teams, but then SMU plays an extra game, and now they're no longer better. I think that just would have set a really bad precedent, and so I'm ultimately satisfied with the decision the committee made.
Yeah, so we're on the same page. I agree. And the thing is, people want to talk about who would be favored and stuff like that. Alabama was favored by double digits versus Vanderbilt and Oklahoma. How did that turn out for Alabama? They lost both those games, and they got destroyed by Oklahoma. That game was not close, and that was the thing for me. And I've heard people, well, 6-6 is different than the SEC, than the Big Ten, than the ACC, than Big 12. Fine, you can have that debate. I actually don't disagree with that. But not even to have a close game versus an Oklahoma team that had close games and close wins versus teams like Tulane versus teams like Houston. They beat Houston, I believe, by 1 point. So
I think it was like 16-14 or something like that.
Yeah, it was one score. It was super close.
Yeah.
And that's my point. You get run out of the building by that team, and they were having struggles scoring versus everyone else moving the ball. They moved the ball pretty well that night versus Alabama. So that's my issue there. And I completely agree. Alabama would probably beat SMU, but we don't know that. And if you're going to put someone into a playoff and just based on that, then at the beginning of the season, we should just line them up, choose the highest rated teams based on recruiting rankings and other things, and just have a playoff there. And let me tell you, as a Texas fan, we've had great recruiting classes in the past that do terrible on the field. So that it does matter. But you also have to have the guy on the sideline coaching that team, and they also have to develop and play that well on a week in and week out basis as well.
No, I think that's fair. Georgia fans definitely wouldn't be too bummed about that. They're getting into that playoff every year. But no, I'm with you. And also, like, the conversation that's kind of like sprung from this of Greg Byrne chiming in and the Alabama athletic director and just people like, well, this is just decentivized. You heard Saban and I think Greg McElroy say it. This just decentivizes teams to play a difficult non-conference schedule now. It's like, the difficult non-conference schedule is not the reason Alabama missed the playoff or the reason Ole Miss missed the playoff. Like, if all those teams were beating the other top 10 and top 15 teams and just losing to each other, then yeah, you might have an argument there. But you guys aren't in the play. Like 3 weeks ago, Alabama and Ole Miss were both in the playoff, even with their 2 losses early in the season. But you lose 3 games and Ole Misses all 3 to teams that are currently unranked. Like, Ole Miss at least didn't get blown off the field by anybody, and they both have the big win over Georgia. But if you lose 3 games, like, I don't know what you're even really upset about.
No, 100%. And that's the thing too. They lost to some of the worst teams in the SEC. Like Ole Miss lost to Kentucky. Their 1 win in conference. Kentucky's 1 win in conference was to Ole Miss on the road. Oklahoma beat
I don't think I
Alabama.
realized that was their only win. Wow.
Yeah. So that's my point is you didn't just lose to, these are decent teams. Like, let's say Alabama had lost to, I don't know, an 8-4 team. I'm trying to think, like, if LSU was 8-4
Texas
instead of
A&M.
9-3, or yeah, Texas A&M. Let's say Texas A&M. They probably, actually, they might get in, honestly, in that scenario. But you got destroyed by a team in Oklahoma where if they don't beat you, that team doesn't even go bowling. So that's my issue with that. And then also in the Vanderbilt one, that team lost to Georgia State. So
Yeah.
there's so many things I just completely disagree with when we talk about that. And again, that was a perfect example. I've heard that for so long now about the out of conference. They played Western Kentucky, Mercer, Wisconsin, and I forget the other one, but or South Florida. That was the other one. Those are your 4 out of conference games. I'll give you credit for Wisconsin. You decided to go on the road and play Wisconsin. The quarterback went out. You manhandled him just like you should have. The other 3 are terrible. One of them's not even an FBS team. So it's really hard for me to say, you know what, you deserve to get them based on that out of conference schedule. Where if they would have scheduled way harder games out of conference and won those games, guess what? They'd probably actually be in, even with the 2 bad in conference losses that they took.
Yeah, exactly. Like there is some room for error. It's like you had 2 losses, and for Ole Miss's case, like to that point in the season, the first 2 losses were who? LSU, an LSU game that you led like 60 minutes of, right? LSU didn't lead until the final score, and then a bad Kentucky team. Like even with those, you still were going to get in the playoff and probably have like a home playoff game at this point. Like old Alabama and Ole Miss, if they don't lose those last games, are probably like the 6 and 7 seeds right now. Like, especially since they both beat Georgia. Well, Georgia won the SEC. Disregard that. But like with what they were I think they were 7 and 8 or something when they lost. There were still a couple things that happened in the final weeks. Like they might be looking at home playoff games if they just don't lose a third game. So I just don't know. You didn't, especially Ole Miss didn't have an SEC gauntlet by any means. Like you look at all the other ranked teams, like Georgia and South Carolina are the only ranked teams, currently ranked SEC teams that they played this year. And granted, they dominated Georgia, but it's not like they had just this gauntlet of a schedule, and they're upset because they lost 3 games.
Yeah, I mean, that's the funny thing. As a Texas fan, we got in one of the easier schedules in the SEC, and people point to that. But then I'll point back and say, especially because I hear it from Alabama and Ole Miss fans, will say, well, the teams on our schedule, we beat them. You lost to a lot of them. We destroyed Oklahoma. We beat Vanderbilt, and we destroyed Kentucky, and you guys lost to all of those teams. So, I mean, we took care of business versus the teams we should have beat. We just lost to what might be the best team in the country. Injuries now, I don't know. We'll have to see about that with Beck out. But just I think it's a bad argument. I do think SMU deserved it. And I also think it's a moot point. Like everyone wants to concentrate on this. Guess what? You're going to have this for maybe one more year, and then we're going to expand to 14, and Alabama will get in, and none of this will matter. But then again, then we'll be arguing who the 14th team should be. Then we'll be arguing who the 16th team would be when we move to that. So that's my issue. Is this is a never-ending argument. It's just like college basketball. And I disagree with it because to me, I'm not going to argue that point until the 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th team wins the national championship. If that happens, then I'll start arguing for the bottom of the bracket. I think it's kind of a waste of time right now to argue about those teams because guess what? I don't think there's any year you could go in the past 30 years of college football where I'm like, you know what? The 12th best team that year could have won the national championship.
Yeah, and this is probably one of those years that it's been more open than most. So there are years, where there's teams that don't make the playoffs, and they could compete with some of those, but it's almost like this is what college football is. Like you didn't earn a right to compete because you lost 2 or 3 games throughout the season. Like especially when you're someone like Alabama or Ohio State or something. Like when you're preseason top 3 or 4, like that's the only reason you're higher than probably South Carolina and Ole Miss here is because where you were in the preseason. So like you guys get enough benefits of the doubt. Like, sorry, you didn't get in losing 3 games.
Yeah, I agree. So let's get to the next point. But first, guys, can you please do us a favor? Please hit that like button. Please subscribe down below. And also check out the SEC channel. If you're not on there and you're on Marks, go over to the SEC channel and subscribe. I have it right in the comment section. There is the link right there. Click on it. Go over there and subscribe. And then also, guys, the Christmas season is coming up, or we're basically almost here. So please use the Amazon link in the description. for all your buying needs for Christmas gifts. Does not change the buying experience or buying process. All it does is put a little bit of change into Mark's pocket. It really helps out. Also, check out Mark's call-in shows every Thursday, Friday, Saturday post-game, and Sunday in the morning. I think the second round of the college football playoffs is on a Wednesday. I believe that's when New Year's Day is, so check it out there as well. We're keeping you updated with all of that. And then check out the Ole Miss channel as well. It really helps grow the brand. And speaking of a particular season, it is transfer portal season. The transfer portal is popping off. I am going to share my screen real quick of the guys already jumping in the transfer portal. It's pretty crazy because I believe there's like 1,500 guys right now. It's absolutely off the chain. And it's one of those things I disagree with when it's happening, but it is happening and it is crazy. So we're just going to go to the very top of this, guys, and we're going to talk about the number one player right now in the transfer portal, Eric Singleton Jr. He is interested in both of our teams, Matt. I don't know how much you know about him, but he's a speedster from Georgia Tech. I think he had over 700 yards receiving, and he is a guy that's commanding, I've heard, ridiculous numbers right now, anywhere between $1 to $2 million.
Yeah, that's wild. I know he had a pretty good game against Georgia when Georgia Tech almost beat the Dogs a couple weeks ago. But yeah, this guy's looking like one of the best playmakers in the portal right now. I think Ole Miss, along with Georgia and Texas, is what I've heard the three schools he's going to be visiting. So yeah, I'm with you. This is like the timing of this and then the portal opening when just the middle. We're trying to get prepped for the postseason is just wild. But we gotta. This is the future, and there's going to be some impact players in 2025 on this list.
Yeah, 100%. Princewell. I'm not even going to try to pronounce the last name because I always butcher it. But I mean, he's already crystal ball.
Umana.
You go for it.
Uman Mielen, I want to say. This is the brother of the Ole Miss defensive lineman, right?
Yeah, he is. And he is crystal ball to Ole Miss. That's funny enough. And I think it's an interesting way that different teams go about this. A lot of teams are heavy transfer portal, and we've seen the good of that, and we've seen the bad of that. With Florida State, you saw last year to where they're all in on the portal. They have a fantastic team. You see this year, they're all in the portal. Their team's terrible. I think the best way to go about it is that culture with high school recruiting and then supplementing through the portal. Some teams, like it seems like Ole Miss, are going straight and hard for the portal again. We have Princewell already crystal balled there. What do you think about the process for certain teams in the SEC, how they're all kind of all over the map and how they go about it?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, the most sustainable strategy is definitely going to be to try to do everything you can out of high school and then just plug in certain spots through the portal. I think that's what you've seen the most successful teams do. Like that's why Clemson's strategy is just so baffling. It's like Georgia's a team that clearly doesn't want to build through the portal. Texas doesn't want to build through the portal. But you look at some of the guys these teams have gotten through the portal the last couple of years, and they're impact players. Like you're making your team better through the portal. So I think in some respects you have to just play the hand you're dealt. And one of the weirder aspects of Lane Kiffin to me is that he's not a good recruiter. Like this guy is young and like cool and everything. It seems like he would be the kind of guy that was a really good recruiter, and they're consistently near the bottom of the SEC. And now they've kind of, I think maybe it's because of their strategy of leaning into the portal, but I think it's kind of a result of their lack of recruiting. They just kind of embraced transfer to the SIP and all that. So I think it's more of a necessity because maybe you can do it and it can be sustainable, but I think you just saw what Florida State, and maybe Florida State was just doing it wrong. But you saw what their portal, acquisitions, how different it could be from 2023 to 2024.
Well, yeah, that was a really good point because they clearly have money because you have to get these guys through the portal with money mostly. Like these guys are going for crazy prices now in the portal. So you have the money. So then to me, you're right. It's either the lack of wanting to go through high school recruiting for Lane Kiffin, or he's just not good at it, or he just doesn't want to. So I don't know what it is. I don't know if he's one of those guys. He does come off as a little bit awkward. So maybe enough time around him in a parent's living room, he doesn't do very well with that. I don't know. I personally, like you said, I don't
calling him a keyboard warrior over there.
He's a little bit of a keyboard warrior for sure. But I don't know. It's just confusing because I agree. You have to find that perfect medium balance, and those are the teams that do well, get to the national championship, get to the Final Four. Whereas that all or one strategy, which way you're going to go, usually doesn't work. And I think it's funny you brought up Clemson. They're starting to do that too. They're starting. I know they've been a little bit more active in the portal this year, and you have to if you want to compete and win a national championship, you have to go through the portal somewhat.
Yeah, like you look at an Alabama, like no one recruited better than Alabama under Nick Saban. And then they go get Jamison Williams out of the portal and he's the best receiver in college football. It's like that's a guy that just completely changed what their 2021 team was. So it's you can there's definitely going to be some impact players that teams get in the portal, especially, I mean, we have 1,500 guys or something like you said, and we're like 4 days in. So yeah, I'm sure it's going to get even crazier, especially, you're seeing some of these teams, guys go in the portal, but they are going to like play in the playoff with their team. So, you saw it with Michigan and Alabama last year. Like you get that little extra buffer if your team goes into January or whatever, and then those guys will have 30 days to decide or whatever the rule is. So yeah, it's going to be crazy because there's some guys on playoff teams that are going to hop in the portal before this is said and done.
Yeah, Texas has had, I believe, 5 or 6 guys jump in the portal. They're all guys that really don't play very much, if at all. But it's insane just looking at this. I mean, Ole Miss already crystal balled for 3 of the top 10 guys. You have Patrick Kutis coming over from Arkansas. It looks like if he does end up at Ole Miss. Jaheim Otis was like one of the first players in the portal from Alabama. He's a very talented defensive lineman, interior defensive lineman. He's crystal ball to Ole Miss. So Ole Miss is getting busy in the portal early. And I want to talk about this guy real quick. Williams Nwari, and I think I pronounced that right. He is one of those guys where he was a 5-star recruit last year. I believe he was the number 2 edge in the class right behind Colin Simmons, who plays for Texas. That is crazy to me that this guy, I'm sure, got a lot of money and he's already back in the portal, probably going to get paid a lot again. And it's going to be interesting to see where he goes. What do you know anything about him, Matt?
Yeah, I think some people had him as the number 1 overall player, I want to say, coming into
That's
last
crazy.
year. I could be wrong about that, but maybe at one point he was the number 1 overall player. But yeah, Missouri had like they changed up their state laws so that high schoolers could collect NIL, and I think that kind of contributed to him signing with Missouri. But in terms of impact he made this year, I didn't hear much about him. But he's a true freshman. The guy's got 4 years of eligibility left, so I would imagine a guy with that kind of high school pedigree is going to be an impact player, but it's hard to say with his lack of production as a true freshman.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. And it's funny because Missouri just got another guy in recruiting. I believe he's, depending on the service, he's either the number 2, or number 3, number 4, number 5 edge, and Javion Hilson as well in high school recruiting. So you land this guy, he immediately jumps in the portal, and then you land Javion Hilson. I'm going to be straight up honest with the Missouri fans here too. Javion Hilson had no interest in Missouri prior to about a week before signing day. So to me, that he screams it's all about money. And people are going to say, well, it's all about money with every recruit. That is not true. Every recruit values things completely differently. And you got to be weary of a guy that was not on your radar, you didn't offer, and then all of a sudden he ends up on your team out of nowhere, basically. And someone like that is willing to jump in the portal pretty quickly. So to me, we'll see how long Javion Hilson even lasts from this class.
Yeah, it's a crazy world we're living in. It's like anytime a guy from a rival team transfers, you're like, oh, what's going on in Alabama's receiver room? They're falling apart. The players, they hate Kalen DeBoer, and you try to assign all these narratives, and then a day later you have a couple guys transfer, and well, they're just transferring because they're greedy and they want money. It's like fans just talk themselves into anything. Who knows, like, the real reason a lot of these guys are transferring? Like, there's rumors about Dylan Raiola, like maybe he'll hit the portal or something, and maybe it's about money, maybe it's about going to a contender, who knows? And I'm just putting it out there. It's a rumor still, so it hadn't even happened. But we had Caleb Downs in the portal last year, and obviously that contributed to, or that was a huge reason. Nick Saban retiring is obviously a huge reason for that. But there's gonna be some just instant impact, like college football superstars that you see jump in the portal for sure.
Yeah, and speaking of Malik Murphy is one of those guys, transferred from Texas last year to Duke. He had a decent season at Duke. He still had problems with turnovers. Texas fans will know he had an issue with that year when he played here for the 2.5 games he did start. It's interesting because Ole Miss again retweeted, or Lane Kiffin retweeted this when he jumped to the portal. So maybe there's some interest there. If Jackson Dart leaves, that's going to be interesting. I think it would be a decent pickup for Ole Miss. I don't love it. Again, the transfer portal is interesting because if you miss on certain guys, like if you miss and Malik Murphy isn't the guy you expect, you're going to have issues next year. So it's going to be interesting how they handle that if they do, in fact, go after Malik Murphy.
That's true. And Walker Howard has hit the portal already, right? From Ole Miss.
Yeah.
It looks like they're oh, it looks like he's saying, does it say he's going to Louisiana? So he's going to Louisiana, Walker Howard, Raging Cajuns. Yeah, I was a little surprised. Malik Murphy was just kind of okay this year. I was kind of expecting him to be just in the brief, sample size we had of him at Texas. I was kind of expecting him to be more of an impact player for Duke this year.
No, I agree. He wasn't great. This is another guy I would keep an eye out, possibly going to an SEC team. Darian Mensah, he's really good, and you have 3 years of him. I believe he's a freshman or redshirt freshman. I could definitely see. I mean, Tulane to Ole Miss, not that far. To me, in my opinion, if I'm an Ole Miss fan, this is a guy I would rather have than Malik Murphy. This guy impressed me tremendously this year, and he would fill a lot of needs at Ole Miss.
Yeah, I could definitely see that.
Other people in the portal or other teams. So, Jakeem Jackson, cornerback transferring from Florida. I've heard talks of him to Georgia, other SEC teams as well. I think teams to keep an eye out on. I think it's funny, two guys, LSU, Florida. I was just about to talk about them. I think you're going to see LSU and Florida be very, very aggressive in the portal. They know, both those coaches know this is a very important year for them next year because if they do not have a successful season, there is a real chance they are fired. And my guess is there's not enough portal guys to go around. Just an early hot take heading into next year, I believe either one of the two of those guys will be fired, if not both, because you're relying heavily on the portal. You got to, and with Florida, you have DJ Lagway. Like, if you don't produce with that guy, from what we've seen, that is going to be a gigantic knock on Billy Napier. And then it's going to be interesting with LSU. I don't even know who the quarterback's going to be. Is Garrett Nussmeier coming back? Is he not? They could be looking at a portal quarterback if he doesn't come back.
Yeah, that's definitely true. That's crazy. I didn't really thought about the hot seat stuff yet. I think Brian Kelly's seat might be hotter than Napier's right now.
It might be. It's been interesting. He's yet to win 10 games there at LSU. To me, LSU is one of those places it's kind of hard to fail because you have Les Miles, who I really don't think is that great of a head coach, wins the national championship, then let go. Ed Orgeron, not a great head coach at all, never succeeded other than at LSU, fired. So Brian Kelly, you can't even win 10 games.
I agree on both counts.
Yeah, that's a big indictment on Brian Kelly if you can't win there. And I'm not even saying win a national championship. Can you win me 10, 11 games possibly in the regular season? I think you should be able to do that at a place like LSU.
Yeah, because that's the thing too. If LSU wins 8 games next year, I think Brian Kelly's fired. But I think if Florida and Napier win 8 games next year, I think, hey, this schedule is going to be brutal again next year because they're kind of the opposite of Georgia. Like, both of those teams had a really probably the 2 toughest schedules in the SEC this year. Georgia had a lot of their toughest games on the road. Florida actually had a lot of their toughest ones at home. Yeah. So they're going to have to go on the road a few times next year. And if they go 8-4, it's like, hey, the SEC is brutal. We got our guy though. Let's trust Napier. If LSU goes 8-4, Brian Kelly, they're done. Like, there's different standards with those two programs right now.
Yeah, and then Creed Whitmore is not because he's a great player, but brings me to this. Mississippi State, listen, I don't know if it's a good thing. I don't know if it's a bad thing. I believe they have over 20 guys in the transfer portal already. Now, you could argue that's a really bad football team that's getting rid of dead weight, and they're going to have to rebuild. You could also argue that you're losing guys like Mario Craver, who jumped in the portal, who I think Texas, as a fan, should be all over. He's a really good wide receiver. He's going to have a lot of eligibility left. He was getting behind SEC defenses. I think he's a freshman very easily. So I don't know which way that's going to go. I personally never liked the Jeff Lebby hire. I didn't really think he was that good at Oklahoma. I don't think he's really that good at or Mississippi State. So it's going to be very interesting in which if they're going to be able to turn that thing around through the portal or not.
I think that's fair. I think just when you're Mississippi State, I think you have to be doing something a little bit different. And like with Mike Leach, so Jeff Lebby's offense is just like a little bit different. And if you're trying to like Clark Lee, granted, I guess he is kind of doing things a little different this year and having more success with that offense. But like this guy's trying to just build like a juggernaut, like we're gonna be a physical team. It's like you're Vanderbilt. You're not gonna ever win games like that. You have to have some sort of gimmicky offense that keeps people off balance. Like I think Mississippi State's kind of in a similar situation. Granted, they have low key produced like a good number of NFL defensive players in like the last few years, like first round picks and things like that. But I think ultimately Mississippi State, I think with Mike Leach and doing like the air raid stuff, I think that's when they're the kind of the most dangerous, especially Dan Mullen too. So they have to have some kind of offensive guy. Maybe Jeff Lebby's that guy. Maybe he's not. But I think they have to have that type of guy to succeed.
Yeah, that's true. I don't disagree with that. It's a whole new world. It's going to be interesting how they treat it. Porter says, I wish Ball, the running back from Florida, would get in the portal. Yeah, he's really good. They have a couple really good running backs there. Montrell Johnson, obviously. Jacoby Jackson, I believe, is the other one. He's a good player. They have a lot of talent offensively. They have good wide receivers, Trey Wilson, guys of that nature. So it'll be interesting if they're able to keep that nucleus together. They need help defensively. Their defense is not very good. It hasn't been for a while. I will say this. It got better down the stretch this year, but it needs to get better for next year for sure.
Yeah, I'm with you. The defense was definitely the biggest reason for their issues this year.
And like you said, they're going to have the same schedule next year. All it is they're going to reverse all the games they played at home. They'll play on the road, and all the road games will play at home. So that's going to be interesting. Texas heads to the swamp next year. That's going to be an electric environment.
I was going to say Texas in the swamp, but you'll play Ole Miss on the road. You'll play
LSU
on the road. Who am I forgetting? There's
A&M on the road.
A&M would be on the road. Yeah. So Tennessee would be at home. So, but yes. You're going to have, and obviously Georgia and Jacksonville. So you're going to have, and maybe Florida State's not as terrible next year. So I don't know. It's going to be a brutal schedule again next year.
Yeah, so that's going to do it for the portal talk. Right now, there's really no breaking news of anyone committing, just a whole bunch of players in it. When there are going to be some guys committing, we'll break it down, talk about their fits and if we like them or not. So far, there are a lot of really good players already in the portal, and I expect once the playoffs are over, or even once their teams are, I could see someone being eliminated in the day after players from that team jumping in. So it's going to be very interesting the next month with the playoff, with the portal, and all of that. So it's going to be fun.
Yeah, and I hope they at least wait until their team loses to jump in. Like, not throwing shade at any college kids here, but Julian Humphrey, like the week of the SEC championship, going in the portal, I don't know about all that. Like, you got to at least, I feel like the conference championship is at least like the end of the regular season. It is at least by definition postseason. But it is like the end of the regular season. You have to at least wait till that game.
Yeah, I mean, I think right now he's lean to Texas from everything I've heard. So it's going to be interesting because that will put him back at home. And I mean, I wouldn't mind him. I think he's I don't think he's a number 2 starting cornerback or anything like that, but I think he'd be a nice rotational piece in the back end for Texas. But I agree. That's a red flag for me. Another one, I'll speak on my team. Jonte Cook left mid-season, and from there on out on Twitter has just been trashing Texas. So that has been a interesting look from him, and apparently that's hurt him. Who would have thought, trashing your old team and being classless on Twitter would hurt you with every other team.
And like Bear Alexander, a guy that went to multiple high schools and now he's transferred multiple. He'll be on his 3rd college in 3 years next year. It's like, I thought that guy was going to be a playmaker from what he kind of produced a little bit as a freshman on Georgia's 2022 team. But so I guess he was at USC for 2 years. Is that right?
Yeah. That's the only place he spent 2 years. Every other place, even high school, he switched every year.
There you go. So yeah, it'll be on his 4th year in college, on his 3rd school. So I think I saw SMU maybe coming back to Texas, I saw a couple other ones. I can't remember off the top of my head, but yeah, he does have some ability, but at what cost?
Yeah, Texas was linked to him last year, and that fan base was split. And then this year, there's been barely any linkage there, but he's been talked about, and the fan base like, nah, we're out. Like he's quit on so many teams, it's ridiculous. He's tremendously talented, but you can get two guys that are better with your culture than one guy that's that talented, in my opinion. It worked just fine.
Especially if you're at Georgia in 2022 as a true freshman getting some sort of playing time. Like, bro, the track record is right in front of your face. Like, Trayvon Walker was like a guy who got like third down reps as a freshman, ends up being a number 1 pick. Jalen Carter was essentially the number 3 defensive tackle his first 2 years on campus, even though he was maybe the best player on our defense. Like, so many guys kind of contributed as freshmen and then broke out as sophomores, were ready to go to the NFL after their junior year. Like, you were on that track. You had the proof right there, the proof of concept right in front of you. And to leave Georgia after getting some ticks as a freshman, like, that's probably a red flag.
100%. Again, guys, can you please do me a favor? Hit that like button, subscribe down below. Also, go over to the SEC channel. The link is right there. Just scroll to the top of the comments and subscribe as well. It really helps out what we're trying to build over there. We are here every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern time, breaking it down for you. Also, guys, can you do us a favor and subscribe over at the Old Miss channel? It really helps out what we're trying to build over there. Again, this is a whole brand we're trying to grow across the network. So subscribe to every show. Even if you don't like them, subscribe to it. Believe me, we drop a video every once in a while you're going to like no matter what fan you are. Also, check out Mark's Call-In Show Thursday, Friday, and Saturday post-game, plus Sunday recap show. That really helps out. And then check the Amazon link in the description. Does not change the buying experience, does not change the buying process, and all it does is put a little bit of change into Mark Rogers' pocket. So next up, we're going to talk about the playoff bracket and whether the system is flawed or not, which I think we both agree it is. And then also the roads these teams have to take to get to the championship game. Who has the easiest road? Who do we like early on? I know the games are about, almost 2 weeks out, basically, but I think it's going to be interesting and a fun playoff. Let's share this real quick.
Just 10 days till the first one, 11 till the other 3.
That's true. So when this came out, Matt, what was your first opinion on it?
So my first opinion, see, what's interesting is so many people were going to Twitter like that day of like the committee, absolute colossal failure, all this. And I think it's like, did you not know the rules? Like, we already knew the bracket was going to be messed up. I felt like I had no real problems with the rankings. It seemed like everything was like logical, based like Ohio State should be ahead of Tennessee. Like, I think there's a conversation we had about, where Penn State and Texas versus Notre Dame should be. But like, I don't think there's any like egregious errors in terms of where they rank teams. And then, yeah, if you're going to have the 9th ranked team in your rankings as the 3 seed and the 12th ranked team in your rankings as the 4 seed, then yeah, it's going to start to get really jacked up. So I guess a lot of people just weren't ready to see it like finalized and like, oh wow, this is terrible. Like, we kind of knew this was what it was going to be for like weeks now, right? Like, especially the Boise State thing, that wasn't even new. Like, them getting a bye has been the case for like the last 3 or 4 weeks. So that was my first take, because I didn't really understand the outrage. Are you with me there?
Oh, 100%. It was funny who I was hearing it from too. Like, I respect Joel Klatt, but that was like one of his tweets. He was like, I'm outraged with the committee and what they did. I'm like, brother, you should have known at the beginning of this that something was going to be screwed up, because they had guardrails. They couldn't do what they wanted to do. They had to do it a certain way. So I just didn't understand that.
Yeah, I guess the one thing that is weird is I don't know how you rank SMU ahead of Clemson with 11-12. Like, because my buddy, Alabama buddy, was just kind of texting me while it was happening, because they kind of previewed like the rank, like, and threw Clemson down there at the bottom. So you're like, okay, we're kind of filling in the slots here. And he was like, well, if the team is ahead of Clemson, it has to be Alabama. And he like sold me. I'm like, oh, I bet you're right. Yeah, you can't put SMU ahead of Clemson. And then they did it at the end. So that's the one thing that's a little weird to me. But I guess SMU Texas, that'd be a great matchup too, right? You get that Lone Star showdown. But yeah, that in terms of like the seeds, that's the one thing. But then you look at the actual road that teams have, and I think I will say there's two things can be true, right? If you're a Georgia fan, I think this is the perfect, like you couldn't have hand selected a better bracket to get, especially if you don't have your starting quarterback for this. But this idea that it's like the bracket is a complete like failure because one Oregon side of it is so difficult. I think part of that, a huge part of that is just our brand bias. It's like we all think Ohio State is maybe the best team in the Big Ten, but by definition, they're the third team in the Big Ten. Like we think Texas, some people think Texas is the best team in college football, but they did lose 2 games. And so they're sitting out the 5 seed. Like, so it's just some of these brands, especially at Tennessee too. Like we everyone talks about Nico and the 5-star, and even though the offense has still not really become that, it's like people are ready for Tennessee to be that. So I think it's like the brand, and maybe Clemson affects that too because they've won multiple national championships. But I think the brands on Oregon's side of the bracket have people thinking like, oh, this is just totally lopsided. But I don't necessarily disagree with how the teams are slotted, if that makes sense.
No, I don't disagree with how they're slotted either. There was some weird, I forget what the combination was, but I saw someone ranked Notre Dame ahead of Texas, but then Penn State behind Texas. Like it was weird. And you can't have, to me, you can't have Notre Dame at the 5 seed because one, they didn't play in a championship game, and two, their one loss was to NIU. You can't reward someone losing to NIU, who is an average MAC team, and put them at the 5 seed. So I would have been fine with Penn State if they were 5 ahead of us and Texas 6. But to me, I completely agree with the committee putting Notre Dame 7. I don't understand why people would even argue that, honestly. I actually think the easiest road is 6. Yeah, and it was so bad. And think about it. Then you would be punishing Texas and Penn State for making the conference championship game. And both those games were competitive. It's not like either of those teams got blown out. They lost by 1 score. One of them lost in overtime. So that didn't make any sense to me if they did drop below Notre Dame. And I think Penn State ended up with the easiest draw. Like you have SMU on your home campus, which is going to be a freezing cold day, most likely in Pennsylvania, which SMU, I don't know if any of those guys have ever played in cold weather because Dallas doesn't really get very cold down in Texas. And they don't really travel up until this point. Any cold place that I believe, I'd have to look. I know Texas does. Texas has played in Iowa State, which has been like 20 degrees at times in November and stuff of that nature. I don't know if SMU does that, but it's going to be interesting. And then you get to play Boise State, and you get to be, your best part of your defense is your running defense, and you get to face them with the running back. And no offense to Mattis Maxon or Mad Dog Maxon, he's not very good at throwing. I think he had a completion percentage in the championship game versus UNLV of like 48% or something like that. So Penn State's got a road to the Final Four for sure.
Yeah, shout out to Maddox though. That's mine and my wife's one of our dogs' name Maddox. She's a Cubs fan. I'm a Braves fan, so it works. So do you see the whole family's name? It's like McGuire and like named after like Willie Mays, one kid, and one's nicknamed after like Mickey Mantle. The whole family. I don't know. I'm a sports guy, but let's pump the brakes a little bit. But yeah, I saw someone break down like what you would have because I'm big on the rematches personally. Like I really want to try to minimize the rematches. So I love that Georgia and Texas are on opposite ends. Like if they meet again, it's for a national championship. Like Ohio State, Oregon, you could potentially get that second round. So there's only so much you can do at times with this. But I think if you had a normal bracket, you could have avoided some of these rematches because I saw this a inverted bracket of not doing the automatic qualifiers, and it had Oregon as the 1 seed facing the winner of 8-9 Indiana, Boise State. Then Texas as the 4 seed facing the winner of 5-12 Penn State, Clemson. Georgia's the 2 seed facing the winner of 7-10 Tennessee, SMU, and then Notre Dame as a 3 seed facing the winner of Ohio State, Arizona State. And it's like that would be just a perfect college football bracket, you know? And it's like this 12 teams, the fact that they did throw Arizona State and Boise State, and I'm all here for the automatic qualifiers, but throwing Boise State and Arizona State with first round buys, it totally, I'm also an underdog guy. And I think most of America is an underdog guy. It changes the underdog dynamic. Now I find myself rooting against Boise State. And like, I find myself rooting against Ashton Genty. I'm like, look, he's had a great season. We can't give a guy the Heisman for doing this in the Mountain West. Like, I'm sorry. That's just my take. Like, I just, there's something about Boise State now. I'm like, if Penn State comes in there and routes them, like I'll be kind of happy about that. And it's like that's not how we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be rooting for the underdog.
No, 100%. If you had to, based on like underdog status and everything, if you had to rank which underdog pulls off the upset, how would you rank those?
Let's see. So that would be Indiana, SMU, Tennessee, and Clemson.
Yes.
The Tennessee Ohio State, that feels like the cop out 9-8. It's like when people say they picked an upset in the NCAA tournament bracket, they took the 9-8. Tennessee is definitely I'm not sure how to feel about that matchup because those teams are kind of built similarly. So I think Tennessee could have a good shot there. But Notre Dame is one, or Indiana, I should say. Notre Dame, I just don't have really an idea of how good they are. Like they've just, after losing to Northern Illinois, they started smashing teams, but Indiana's basically done the same thing the whole year too. They've been smashing a bunch of inferior teams. So those teams have essentially identical resumes, but Indiana lost to Ohio State and Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois. So I don't know that Notre Dame is really a better team than Indiana. And it's also, I wonder how the obviously it's a big game for both teams, but I wonder about the dynamic and just like who wants it more type stuff because they haven't played since 1991. And before that, they hadn't played since like the 50s. So, Notre Dame thinks they're on a whole nother level than Indiana. They don't have to play them. It's a Georgia State type of different level to them. So Indiana's definitely going to come in there with a chip on their shoulder. And we've seen Coach Signetti and the swagger they've had all season. I think they've been waiting because everyone basically wrote them off after the Ohio State game and probably hasn't even watched their game since then. So I think they're kind of, just kind of under the radar here, and they're a really dangerous team.
No, I agree with that. I think this playoff bracket is all about styles make fights, and I think Indiana's style mixed with Notre Dame's style. Notre Dame isn't an explosive offensive team through the air, and to me, that's how you beat Indiana or blow them out at least. I think this is going to be a close football game. I don't know if they cover, but I do think it's within 10 points. I'm pretty confident saying that. I think the biggest mismatch is SMU Penn State. I was surprised Texas was favored by, I think 11.5 over Clemson. Like, I think we're better in Clemson. I think if we play to our upper echelon capabilities, I think we beat them by 2 touchdowns. But do we do that? No, we never do that. Like, we should have taken a hold of the Georgia game in the first half, and it was 6-3. So we don't do that. So I think that'll be closer than I expect it to be, or it should be. And it's going to be fun either way. Like, these are good matchups. I don't really care what I've seen people say, oh, it's going to be blowouts. I really don't think most of these games are going to be blowouts. I think Tennessee, Ohio State will be a close game. I think Clemson and Texas will be a close game for most of the game. And I think Indiana and Notre Dame will be a close game. I think the only possibility I see SMU beating Penn State is if Kevin Jennings just goes off. If he goes off, they have a chance because he's a really special player. He's a really good football player.
Yeah. And after last week, and now obviously it's Oregon. So, that's a team that scored a lot of points against them. But now I feel like I haven't even seen Penn State get in a shootout like that. So I'm like, oh, Penn State might play a game that's a shootout. I just expect every game Penn State plays to be in the teens and then the first 1 to 20 wins. I'm with you. I think Texas, Ohio State feels like kind of the sexiest matchup of the 4. But Clemson Tech, did I say Ohio State, Tennessee? Did I say that wrong?
You said Ohio State, Texas. I know what you meant, though.
Oh, yeah. Ohio State, Tennessee. Clemson, Texas is like a low key because I've kind of questioned Texas throughout the year just only because of the strength of schedule. And so Clemson is right there that like, yeah, they've basically, I think the only 3 like top, I think 40 teams they played in like, according to ESPN's FBI were Georgia, South Carolina, and Louisville. And they lost all of those games. And then obviously they beat SMU. So that was their best win of the season. But for the most part, they basically lost to all the best teams they played. And Texas is one of those. They went 11-1, obviously, in the regular season. But Texas A&M is really the only good win of their, I would say, to this point in the season. Would you agree with that? Michigan, it's a good win. I'm not going to disrespect their whole schedule, but in terms of currently ranked teams, they don't have a win over a currently ranked team. Is that right?
No, that's right.
So that's why I'm like, there's still part of me that doesn't know what Texas is made of. And Georgia kind of dealt with this a little bit. I don't know how you could probably, give give me more of the inside knowledge on Texas. But Georgia kind of dealt with this going into 2021 after losing the SEC championship with Stetson and playing Michigan in that opener of like half the fan base didn't want Stetson to start that game. And with what Ewers is a really good quarterback, it's not like the JT Daniels, like Stetson of 2021. Like I would say Ewers has been better than that, but there's just so many people that want to see Arch Manning and the dynamic he brings to the field. Like I wonder like kind of how that contributes to Texas.
No, I agree. I'd say this fan base is 50-50 split. My opinion on that is if his name was Arch Wells, would anyone be calling for Quinn Ewers' job?
Yeah.
Probably not. So that's my issue with it is he's only Arch Manning, so that's why he called for his job. And I definitely question like the national media because they're just going on with that for a story. Let's be honest here. They haven't sat down and watched Arch Manning's film versus ULM and Mississippi State. He was okay in both those games. He wasn't great in either one of those games, and he does not understand the offense. Now, do I think he should be utilized more? Absolutely. He should be utilized in the red zone because he's a really good athlete, and he can still throw. People forget, still has a really strong arm. And Texas, at this point, we have to try something in the red zone. I talked about this on my live show yesterday with Texas. So I don't count Steve Sarkisian's first year. I really don't count any coach's first year. It's whatever. So I went from second year, 13th in red zone scoring offense. Last year, we were 89th in red zone scoring offense. Iowa, for example, was 90th. So we were one spot better than Iowa. This year, we are 106th in red zone scoring offense. So this isn't a quarterback situation. This isn't an offense situation. This is a Steve Sarkisian play calling situation because he struggled with this with the Falcons. So in my opinion, put Arch out there in the red zone. Let him go to work. I think Ewers moves the ball beautifully. Between the 20s, we move the ball pretty easily versus everyone we face. The perfect example of this is 6 quarters versus Georgia and A&M, which Georgia's a fantastic defense. A&M's still a pretty good defense. We have over 600 yards of offense, and we've scored 16 points. Think about that. 600 yards of offense and we scored 16 points. Texas moves the ball, and that's what's holding Texas back. If they start scoring in the red zone, that does, in my opinion, make them the best team in college football. Will they do that? Probably not, because they haven't done it for the last 2 years.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that argument. I just at the end of the day, I feel like I still trust Steve Sarkisian more than all of us, right? Like you've seen, it's become such a popular talking point since that game of just why was Arch Manning not there making an impact? And it's like, well, he did get like 2 series against Georgia the last time, and he wasn't just like tearing it up or anything. Like when you were like Texas was moving the ball a lot in that game. Like I don't know who I put that game on if I'm a Texas fan, but I don't feel like I put it on Quinn Ewers. Like, I don't know. Maybe that's me. Like it felt like I actually tracked the plays in that game, and 40% of the plays in that game were either for Texas offense were either a 10+ yard gain or a negative play. Like it was just, they were either picking up 15, 20, 30 yards, or Georgia was getting a sack and they were losing 7, or they were just getting shut down on the run game. Like it was a very odd game. They didn't run the ball at all either. Didn't run the ball well, I should say. So like Quinn Ewers, I don't know how you watch that game and just think Quinn Ewers is the problem. Like that's just me. I guess I'm just not usually the guy that overreacts and like wants to blame everything on the quarterback.
No, you and I are on the same page. Quinn Ewers to me is like 3rd or 4th on the list of who I blame. I thought Sark's play calling in that game was pretty bad in certain situations. Like Georgia, the screen and long timing plays do not work. You can't run those double fake reverse screen type stuff. That doesn't work versus Georgia. They're way too disciplined and way too athletic, especially when they play good teams. When they are locked in, they are disciplined and athletic. It does not work. Guess what was working? When we dropped back to pass and stretched them vertically, we were hitting them for chunk plays. And I don't know why we just went away from that. And then outside zone, you can't run it versus them. You either get a holding penalty or they're just so fast they run it down too easily from the backside. So you can't run that versus them. And then number 2 to me is Bert Auburn. Like you cannot miss the 42-yard field goal. Like if we make that, the game's over. We would have won the football game. And you especially can't penalties. That would be the third thing. You got a false start to put Bert Auburn in the position after you already made a 39-yard field goal to kick a 42-yard field goal and lose. So there's so many little things, but this has been the story of Texas. Like if anyone watched that A&M game, it's 17-7. Texas should have won that game 31-0. They dominated that football game. A&M had one drive the whole game, and it was 17-7. So that's just the story of Texas this year.
Yeah, I think that's fair. In Sarkisian, in Texas defense, it's like we hadn't seen that. They're essentially the only team that's seen that Georgia defense like all year long. The first time they played and the second time they played. So I imagine with how Texas have been running the ball the last few weeks, you think how Georgia's been giving up yards through the on the ground last few weeks. You would have thought that was an advantage Texas would have in this game. And I don't know. I think it's something about Kirby Smart. Maybe he's playing coy at times in the season, but it seems like in the big games, like when the defense has had struggles, like they have something dialed up in the big games, and like they come ready to play at a different level. But it's insane. I'm not really sure what to expect. It's with what this Georgia. If you would have told me like 3 or 4 weeks ago that Georgia was going to win the SEC, like I probably right after that Ole Miss win or Ole Miss loss, I probably would not have believed you. Like this team was just not looking very good at all. And then Carson Beck gets hurt, and like Gunnar Stockton just made some plays, didn't play great, but just made enough plays to win the game. But yeah, it was an insane performance, and I'm not even sure what to expect of Georgia now in the 12-team playoff, even though they are coming off like their best win of the season.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. So real quick, because Matt does have to go to do the Georgia show at 8. I need your Final Four prediction real quick, Matt.
Oh man, Final Four prediction. We got to do this on the spot. This is subject to change. I may change my mind, but right now, I think the Final Four. Oh man, this isn't going to be creative. I'm going to be right there with everyone else. I'm sure, but right now, to me, it looks like Oregon, Texas, Georgia, and Penn State.
Okay, I'm going to go Texas, Ohio State, Georgia, and I'm going to go Penn State. That'd be my Final Four right now, and I agree. I'd subject to change. The closer I get, the better my predictions get. Right now, this is just totally a gut feeling. I've not looked at these matchups close enough. But that's my Final Four prediction right now.
Yeah, I could see it. I think Ohio State, of all the teams playing in that first round, Ohio State feels like definitely one of the stronger contenders to get to the Final Four.
Yeah, for sure. Again, guys, please hit that like button. Please subscribe down below. It really helps out the channel. Use the Amazon link in the description. Does not change the buying process. All it does is put a little bit of change into Mark's pocket. Also, check out the Ole Miss show every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern time with Leanne and Mark. So please go over there and subscribe. And then check out Mark's call-in show every Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and post-game, plus Sunday morning reaction if you don't want to stay up late, which completely understand that. This has been the 11th edition of the SEC Live Show. Again, can you give me a follow over there at Twitter or X, whatever you decide to call it? There is my Twitter handle or X handle. And then also do me a favor and go over and follow Matt over there as well. He's the host of the Georgia show, which kicks off in about 7 minutes. So I need to rush and get him off to there. So please give him a follow on there as well. I appreciate you joining me today, Matt.
Yes, sir, man. Looking forward to joining you again.
Yep. Thank you guys again.